Hey everyone, this is Nebulism giving you a talk today on Rifter PvP. Today I'll be presenting a plated ancillary Scram kite fit, which uses 150mm autocannon Tech 2s, Scram kite package, and a plate, and ancillary armor repair. This fit is surprisingly powerful, especially for a hull that in the current meta I think is considered somewhat underpowered. The 400mm plate gives quite a bit of staying power on the field. And the ancillary armor wrap, of course, allows you to utilize that buffer to repair a little bit of damage. What's really nice and friendly about this build is it's actually relatively easy to fly, and it can engage a variety of different targets, whether they be Brawl, other Scram kiters, and occasionally other kiters. The other thing that lends to its simplicity is the fact that with the buffer you can fire and forget the ancillary armor repair when it's heated, for typically a full set of cycles, assuming that your thermodynamic skills are high enough. The damage selection is also good, which allows you to project out a little bit farther with barrage, or target the particular holes that are found in either armor or shield tank fits. Additionally, the rigs are to shore up the rest of the fit, and as you can see, the ammo below is for all these different engagement scenarios. This particular fit has a reasonable profile for engaging other T1 frigates, as well as the occasional faction frigates like Federation Navy Comets, Imperial Navy Slicers. However, your mileage may vary quite a bit, depending on skills and comfort level. So let's get into some PvP. So in this first fight, we see a draw between my Rifter and an Atron. He's the typical blaster fit. And my goal is to come in here, heat up my afterburner, and try to pull a little bit of range, at least to get away from him. It's going to be a difficult task, of course, because on the Atron, the hull itself is a little bit faster than the Rifter, and so with everything else equivalent, he should be able to dictate range initially. In any case, I hope that my tank, damage selection types, and so forth manage to help win. And what we find is that as we go through here, the plate holds up pretty well to the beating that it takes from the Atron, to the extent that I burn through the Atron's ancillary rep charges, and ultimately Sir Yag pulls range. And here was the first mistake, of course, which was I noticed a little too late and let Yag get away, and he was able to pull off and survive. On the next fight, I'm going to engage an Imperial Navy Slicer, this Nyquid Erdoron, and of course, a Slicer fit in general tends to be kitey, although I've heard of some Scram kite fits. I've never seen one in practice, and I end up landing the Scram in the tackle kit right off the bat, which this pretty much, as anybody knows now from fighting these things, it's just an inevitable fight toward the end of where he'll eventually pop. So as you can see, he's repping a little bit, and which means he's going to be soaking some damage using his ancillary rep. There were a few mistakes I made. I tend to go with barrage first, and I probably could have just stayed with barrage and just toughed him out, knowing that he eventually will die. I did decide in this case to switch out damage types for a little bit of the better tracking, a little bit more focused damage on him, so I went with fusion. And again, I probably could have just stayed at that appropriate damage, maybe kept at range of on the order of 650 or so meters away from him, and he pops. This next short clip is a quick demonstration as to situational awareness. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of this clip, but this basically shows that when you're fighting on a station and your target's taking guns, that you might be able to leverage those guns to do a little bit of extra damage, and then assuming you scram and tackle at the right time, the target dies and you get a nice looking kill. You know, I'm not going to say a Rifter and a Worm are going to be an even match by any degree. And if anything, I was just waiting to see if his remote reps would land or would undock, which they didn't, so I tackled him just a bit before that clip began, and then he died. Another good situational awareness example where I messed up. I was playing light, quick tackle with small modification to this fit. Knowing I would probably take gate guns, I should have just aligned out, at least landed the first point, just warped off and warped back in. In that case, I messed up. Thought reps would hold me and popped. This next fight was a ton of fun because I knew I was going to have a mirror match on my hands. Elliot here's flying a Rifter. I wasn't exactly sure what kind of Rifter at first, but then as we started working into each other a little bit, I noticed he does have some type of plate fit because he's a bit tanky. And so for this, my damage type selection, I believe, is I chose Republic Fleet Fusion, figuring that this will be a fun kind of keep at range, dual Scram type of fight. And so here was just a nice bit of work on the management. As you can see here, I overheated my reps, started repping up that plate, and he's taking some damage, repping it up as well. So definitely a true endurance fight. And it was pretty enjoyable to kind of explore how this was going to turn out. Gave a good amount of time to also figure these things out. And so once I realized that we were probably pretty much going to hold at 5K or so, or 4K, I went back and forth a little bit with heating my afterburner and so on. With my Thermo 5 as it currently is, I didn't want to burn out all my mid modules, and I basically just wanted to keep him in nearby. Now, as you can see, he is running 200 millimeter autocannons in my damage log, and so he actually does have a bit of a range advantage on me and is able to technically apply a little bit more DPS. So perhaps I should have heated a little bit more. In any case, pretty close fight, mirror fight even, and we end up going both into structure. And then at this point, I think it starts getting to the point of luck of the draw when people start getting close to getting popped and so on. And I almost get his pod out, and that is the end of this particular fight. So I end up fighting him again, and this time it fares more in his favor than mine. Again, mirror fight. As you can see, he's running those 200 millimeter autocannons, and so this is something that's really fun. I really enjoyed these series of fights because they really kind of let you explore a bit about how best to play, how and you know, see if you repeat mistakes and so on. In this case, I approached him and you know, heated my afterburner, heated my guns, heated everything that was relevant, and he was repping me a little bit better this time and applying damage. And so whether it be luck of the draw, skill differences, etc., sometimes fights can just work out in the favor of you or your opponent. Clearly, I think here the 200 millimeter does hold a bit more of an advantage, and in order to fit that, of course, his plate is going to be a 200 millimeter plate rather than a 400 millimeter plate. I think it does tend to go a little bit back and forth, and perhaps since our transversals aren't too huge, Hale might have helped a little bit more, although he is kind of orbiting me, as you see at this point. So regardless of whether Fusion or Hale, or the fact that if he has 4 or 5 skills, and if I have 4 or 5 gunnery skills, in any case, the fight goes down into structure again, like it did last time, as everybody probably should expect, and just luck of the draw, RNG. I think that's pretty much what happens. We're pretty much even up, and I pop before he does this time. Again, really good fight with Elliot. It was a ton of fun. So this next fight was an entertaining, kind of a bit of a cluster 1v1v1. I noted there were 2 FNCs having at it in a novice, and so I dove into it to see just what I could clean up, what I could engage, what would happen. I tried to be fair, whore on both of these things, but I made a mistake and didn't even apply a web on one of the guys I wanted to. As you can see from what's going on with regard to the damage that's being applied, I'm hitting up Lurk Strog, and I wanted to hit up Hughes to get a bit of damage on him to get on the kill mail, but that didn't happen. So in any case, now we move on to fighting Lurk Strog, who actually ended up being a little bit more difficult. This was a bit earlier in my fighting as I was figuring out the Rifter and developing my skills a little bit more, and then I realized in my damage log later that he was using a railgun fit. So I was not fully prepared exactly for a railgun fit. I should have orbited him rather than keep at range, because he does have somewhat of an advantage there. As you can see, he applies a boatload of damage to me, and in all intents and purposes, if I would have made these decisions during a normal 1v1, I more than likely would have lost, or I would have lost. But in any case, there are a variety of things here that were mistakes. I let my guns burn. I make a variety of mistakes early on, and This was one of those good learning fights to improve upon for future combat. And so yeah, I actually get Lurk's pod, and at this point, I point him up and see that my guns are dead. Try to basically do nothing, and then I let him go. Here's a good fight where I pick on a Thrasher, knowing that this is probably going to be a losing battle, but I wanted to see what would happen regardless. And the first thing that'll be noticeable once I get into range on this guy is that he applies a newt on me, which progressively applies a significant amount of pressure to my tank and ultimately causes me to lose this battle. To be fair, I think that if he was a full T2 fit, he would have mopped the floor with me much earlier. And in this case, I can survive and plink at him a little bit longer. For the most part, the conclusion here is that a Thrasher is out of range in terms of a T1 Rifter, but it was still a fun fight, good learning experience, that kind of stuff. So in this next loss video, I'm going to show you guys a fight I picked with a crewer. What I did, strategically, is I said, okay, well, this crewer is probably beam fit, armor fit, loaded fusion, probably should have loaded hail, and started orbiting him on the order of 500 meters to reduce the amount of damage taken from beams. And so, that's what we can see here. One of the big weaknesses of this fit is the ability to survive under newt pressure, because it effectively shuts down all your tackle kit along with the repairing capabilities. It looks somewhat like he's running an Ansel rep, possibly, with the plate, because the amount of damage that he's able to take. I tend to only be chipping away on the order of 15-20% unless I get super lucky on a hit. Capless guns are nice, but he has shut down the rest of this package, and as you'll see for the remainder of this fight, he's basically going to just whittle me down. Now, it does appear that I am starting to break into his tank. Now, unfortunately, my endurance is much lower than his due to the sustainment of the cap warfare. And as the rest of you can tell, I'm going to pop. Alright, so I end up fighting this guy again, and I get the tackle and scram package off right off the bat. As you can see, I overheated the afterburner just to make sure that he wouldn't coast out of range. I've had some problems with that, with other fights you guys will see in future videos, in particular with guys that like to run high-grade snakes. And at this point, it's just whittle him down and burn him up. And apart from that, probably deltas, I could have managed my reps just a wee bit better. I forgot to take my drugs in order to do a little bit extra damage. Those are just some things to improve in the future. I could have kept the heat going. I don't know why I shut it off. I didn't pay attention enough. And then I think I might have actually grabbed his pod. Nope. So this was a particularly fun fight because it ends up turning a bit more dynamic into a 1v1v1 fight. So I see Elliot here again. This is the guy that we've kind of had the mirror matches going on. And lock him up, start approaching. I think at this point I might have actually have loaded hail, which possibly could have been a little bit of a disadvantage, especially if he would start orbiting me. In any case, I start burning into him, heating up my reps, and fired away. All of a sudden, this other guy lands on us in a Thrasher. And so what I decided to do actually is keep chugging into Elliot, since I'm already a bit committed. But I do lock him up and start staring at the Thrasher. One mistake I did make, of course, as you see right there, is I forgot to overheat my guns, which would have helped quite a bit when fighting Elliot, and that was a mistake into this fight. As I see the Thrasher getting burned up a bit, I said, you know what the heck? Let's switch it up and team up on this guy, because the Thrasher is kind of dangerous in the sense that it can do a significant amount of damage. And so, in fact, he also is firing at me at this point, so worthwhile to lock him up and blap him. And so I end up blasting this Thrasher and trying to stay alive effectively. Some mismanagement happened here on the order of heating my guns. I thought about briefly re-engaging Elliot, but then being in structure, I managed to get off and warp to safety. So I think that was a fun fight, you know, showing a little bit of the chaos and some mistakes that get made during it. So the final 4 fights in this video are a collection of losses, which I think help illustrate some good learning experiences, as well as understanding where the Rifter sits in the pecking order of things. First, I wanted to explore what would happen if I fought a Hookbill. And so the Hookbill has a pretty nice kit for the mid slots that allows for a flexibility of both tank as well as range selection. Additionally, because of the rocket damage, they're able to hit particular resist holes that are more or less minimum resist holes, so damage selection is nice. And rockets are pretty effective weapons. So as you can see here, I'm not going to chalk up to the fact that I lost because of that. That second guy that landed on me, but the Hookbill more than likely would have killed me anyways. For this fight against Yag, it's another one of the fights where I try to dictate range, and he's a little bit faster, so that makes it exceedingly difficult. In fact, later on, I'll have another video series. I'll show beating him with hail instead of fusion, and it was just that extra 10 or so percent, 15% extra DPS is what was needed in order to pop him. And so again, super close fight. Was a ton of fun. I like fighting this guy. He's a nice guy, so we often duel and so forth, and so it's enjoyable to fight him. In this third loss, pretty close loss against a Republic Fleet Firetail, more or less the bigger, badder, more awesomer, if you will, version of my Rifter. In any case, I see that he is probably rolling out with artillery, given that the damage frequency, and you can actually see he's using 200 and whatever they are, 280 millimeter howitzers. And so easily able to control range, which is what he does. I wish I would have probably used barrage to get a little bit more damage into him, because he's going to sit at like 9k, which is right at the end of my fall off, and it's going to dramatically drop my damage. And so with the barrage pushing me out to about 13k fall off, at least I probably would have kept up a bit more damage on him. However, he ends up popping me. I do end up switching to barrage, but at this point, it's just a little too late. He's probably going through some reload cycle now or get ready to finish me off. And so this was a good fight, though, for understanding what the heck's going on. I probably could have heated my afterburner just a little bit more. In fact, the fight goes pretty close, all things considered. And so perhaps if I would have been in barrage the whole time, I would have applied better damage through the majority of the fight. My suspicion is he probably would have just warped off, though, and pulled range with overheating his webs, and would have gotten away from me. So on this final fight, I thought this was in the bag, and this was a nice surprise punch to the face. I fought this Kestrel, and this Kestrel greatly surprised me for a variety of reasons. First, was not prepared for armor tank Kestrel, was thinking shield tank Kestrel, and so I had EMP instead of fusion. And given the amount of damage that he's loading into me with his Nova Rage rockets, you can clearly see that I have 0 time to switch ammo. So I say, what the heck, we're going to try to survive. Second thing is, because he's this armor tank, he's got range advantage. And so this is a really nice Scram kite fit for doing range control. Presumably, if you want to run really rigged, you can fire up those Asclepions and stuff and be pretty difficult to kill whilst taking out other T1 frigates. And so I'm looking forward to when eventually I fly Kestrels, and I'm going to try out this fit because it seems like it's a lot of fun and can kill people. Anywho, thank you for watching, everyone, and hope that was informative.